Hello and welcome to today's episode of Spec Steppin, where we are stepping through the web API spec, one API at a time. So in today's episode, we're going to cover the Document Picture API, as you can see from your screen. Now, just a word of note, this is still listed as experimental technology. If we look down to browser compatibility, it's available in Chrome, Edge, and the nightly version of Firefox, but it's pretty limited and it's not a general release. It's like I said, still experimental. I would not use it in a production environment, but this is one, unlike some of the others, where it seems like it's closer to that point of being available because some are really limited. But you'll see I can do this in Brave here, which is a Chromium-based browser, and it works. So this is one to keep an eye on because it might provide some of the functionality that you may be familiar with if you're using some sort of streaming service where you can click and have that whatever you're watching kind of pop out of a in its own window of the picture-in-picture context, so it will show up and then you can watch it while still browsing some other stuff. So this is a pretty cool functionality. I'll let you go through the documentation on your own. Let me just show you a quick demo first, and then we'll jump over to the code. Okay, I didn't want to have to mess around with the video or whatever. That's just add complexity because I'm just showing the picture-in-picture functionality. But you could add any content basically within this, such as a video, which is probably the most common usage. But you could add other content in there. Maybe take some key features from a dashboard of data and drop it down into one and have it float, and so someone could dive deep on the data while still seeing the above the 30,000 foot view of the data in the picture-in-picture. So there's multiple uses of this. So all I have here is I just have this timer, and I can reset the timer back to 0. You'll see that's pretty basic functionality. And I've set this up kind of in a toggle thing. So when I click toggle PIP, you can see it pops it out here in its own window, and I could still browse around. I've got some placeholder text here where it says timer active in picture-in-picture. You'll see why I do that from a CSS layout standpoint, but you could do some stuff with that while you're doing it. And then when you're done, I can just close it and it pops it right back here into the window. So toggle it open. There we go. Close it back. And so we can do this picture-in-picture thing where we pop it out. So pretty cool functionality, even though it's still experimental. So let's jump into the code and take a look at this. So first, let me go to the HTML. That's pretty basic HTML. I just have some instructions there. I have a div, and in my div, I just have some buttons I'm grabbing. I have a div that shows the timer that I'm doing programmatically, things like that. So, and then styles are just for prettying it up. All those styles are important when you're talking picture-in-picture, and I'll point that out in the code, in the JavaScript code. Otherwise, you may get tripped up by stylistic things when you're going picture-in-picture. But pretty basic HTML, pretty basic styling, nothing super outlandish here. But let me jump into the code where the magic actually occurs. So first thing I do is I'm grabbing all my elements of my page, and then I have some state information. So I want to keep track of the window that opens up. That's my PIP window. And then seconds is just for the timer thing. So then a simple timer, I mean, if you've been developing in JavaScript or probably any language for any amount of time, you probably had to do something similar. You create some sort of a timer. I happen to use set interval here and just to have it click off the time. So nothing super outlandish there, pretty basic 101 type stuff. I just wanted something that was moving without using a video to show how it could be counting and doing stuff, and then you jump out into the window and it's still doing, it doesn't lose its place, it's still doing what it's doing, and so you can go back and forth and it's still counting. So I don't know if you noticed that or not, but sir, I'm at 215. I jump out to 17. It was, I don't know if you saw it in the video, but it went to 216 real quick before it jumped out. So 224, boom, back to 224, 225. So I just wanted to show something that was that it would continue on in whatever you programmed it to do. Now, the real magic happens in this toggle picture-in-picture function. That's the core logic, but I want to jump down here just to show you I added it to that click button. I added the click event listener, so to toggle it. And then here is just a reset logic, nothing fancy there either. I tied that to this button here. When I reset it, sets it back to 0 and starts it over again. I don't ever stop the reset interval because I don't plan on this running forever, just for demo purposes. So let's jump into the meat of the logic here. So first thing I do, if you've watched any of my videos, I always recommend checking your environments for whether something is capable to do this or not. You have no idea what browsers your end users are using, and to have some sort of a graceful fallback. Now, I wouldn't necessarily call this graceful. I'm just doing an alert saying, hey, it's not supported in this browser. I probably wouldn't do that in production. I'd probably try to provide a nice little message and maybe some alternative functionality saying, hey, we can't do document picture in picture in your browser, but here, try this type of thing. Or maybe remove the ability on the screen to go picture in picture, that sort of thing. So then I'm checking to see if it's already open, if that picture is already open. This provides that toggle functionality. So if it's already open, when they click on that, when they click the button, it'll close it. So here, if I toggle and then I close again, see it toggles it back and forth. So I'm just checking to see whether it's open or not. Then in my main functionality here, so first thing I do is I request the PIP window. So I basically, when you do the request, it creates a blank window. So you go into this API document picture in picture, and you run this request window method, and then you can send some information to it, like the width and height, some parameters that you can send through that. But basically, I'm saying, okay, I want a blank window within which I can do stuff. Okay. So this one I briefly referenced when going through the styling just a few moments ago. This is sometimes missed. I know I missed it when I first started working with this because my thought process was, well, I'm opening up a window and it's within the context of this page, so the CSS should apply. Not the case. Okay, CSS does not carry over, at least at this point, at the recording of this video with this spec of this API, the styles do not carry over. And so what you have to do is you have to basically you could programmatically inline the styles. That probably had a lot of code. But basically, what I did here is I said, okay, let's take the style sheets that we have. I only have one, but I use spread to grab them all just with one, and then go over each style sheet. Again, I only have one, but on most production apps that I build, I usually have multiple style sheets for various organizational purposes. So I grab the style sheets. Oh, and on a side note, it's also a good practice to do it this way because you may have multiple style sheets when you're building your app in your dev environment, but depending on how you set your production CI/CD process up, you may have it to where it says, okay, take all of these 5 style sheets, however many you have, compress them all to one, minify them, make them all one. So you make it more performant. So in this case, it doesn't matter if I have 1 or 5 or 10 or whatever. I'm putting them on here and looping over each one. And then I'm grabbing the rules and putting it in this constant array right here, spreading those out in that array and mapping over them and just basically joining them all back up into a document, so to speak. And I'm creating an element, a style element, putting those rules that I've looped over and putting them in that style element. So basically, I'm creating a style tag in the header, so to speak, on the fly programmatically. And then in my PIP window that I created earlier, that was a blank window, go into the head and append that style element, tag element that I copied in all the rules for. Okay. So I did that so the styles, so that when I go back and forth, see the styles are consistent. If I didn't do that, this would have come over as just blank HTML, black and white stuff. So it wouldn't have been very fancy, as fancy as that is not. So then I'm moving the content. So I've got the styles now. So I've got a blank window that's 340 by 300. I've got styles to it. Now I got to move over the content. So what I'm doing is I'm taking an existing element and basically appending it to the body of my PIP window. Now, there's a key feature why I'm doing this is this this preserves my listeners. So like the reset button and that toggle of open and closing that I'm setting up. So when I come here, I go here, I can reset from here and it goes back. So that type of functionality. So I'm preserving all those listeners as it's going over the PIP window. Okay. And then so it's documenting or it's appending that PIP content, which if you look up here, I'm grabbing that PIP content up here. So you can grab whatever you want and append it over. Okay. So I'm moving the content. I'm just updating the UI. So I'm updating that button, that toggle button. So right here instead toggle PHP, I'm PIP, PHP. I'm toggling it to say close PIP. Okay. So just a little UI thing, nothing fancy there. Then this one is key also, depending on how you want your UI to handle the PIP functionality when it breaks out. So if I take that uh, content and I've basically moved it and appended it to my PIP window, if I don't do this, what is going to happen is this area where it used to live just collapses, kind of like doing a hidden type of thing. It just collapses. So it's not, it may screw up your UI. Okay. Now you may set up your UI so it does that on purpose. And so you've set up the styling of the elements around it so it maybe gets rid of this so it's not taking up real estate and it collapses it so you have more information. Perfectly valid to do. But I wanted to show how you could keep that placeholder there programmatically. So I just created a div, added some ID class name, added some content, and put that back into the page. Now, handling closing. So when the page gets hid, so we've got one thing with the toggle button, but we also have clicking this button right here. So it goes back. I didn't show that earlier. So that's, I wanted to handle when that gets closed. So the event is on page hide. So when I'm listening for that event, basically what I'm doing is, and actually I'm trying to get into the habit of using query selector because I think it's more efficient, but just a stylistic thing. So I'm basically grabbing that placeholder and I'm removing it. So right there, that line of code, when I close this, I'm grabbing this placeholder stuff, pulling it out of the DOM, getting rid of it. Okay. Then I'm taking that content that was in the PIP window and I'm putting it back into the DOM of the main window. Okay. So I'm pulling that back in. Then I'm changing for stylistic UI purposes, changing the button back to toggle PIP and setting the PIP window back to null. And of course, I've got some error handling there. So not a huge amount of code. Of course, this is pretty simple. I'm not doing anything fancy from a video standpoint or anything like that, but pretty cool functionality. Again, it is experimental, so I wouldn't use it in production, but this is one definitely when this is no longer experimental, this is one that I plan on incorporating into some possible UI pieces to make it better for the end users. So if you have any questions, let me know. And if not, happy stepping.